and welcome back. Today I will be going over the kinds of projects which are typically not acceptable when you are choosing your STEM fair project. In general, you should avoid projects if you can't isolate the variable, there's a small sample size, no quantifiable data, or an obvious answer. You also need to make sure your project is not a demonstration, too broad in scope, or a preference survey. If your project compares two unrelated variables or determines something already observed, it should also be avoided. What does it mean you can't isolate the variable? This means you can't create a controlled experiment where only one variable is changed at a time. For example, if you're trying to figure out what is more useful, life experience or wisdom, it would be very difficult to separate the variables. Older people tend to have more education and life experience. Also, if you're looking at the optimal bat weight for hitting a baseball the farthest, it would depend on the person hitting the ball. To isolate the variable, you would have to find enough people with the same height, weight, strength, and experience to collect data and come to a conclusion. Make sure that your sample size is large enough. The sample size is the number of independent measurements for a given set of conditions. For example, if you are studying differences in hand-eye coordination based on age, you would need to be able to find at least 20 people from each age group. If your sample size is too small, then you won't know if there's a significant difference between the groups. If you are investigating what is the salt tolerance of radish plants, you would need at least 30 plants exposed to each concentration of salt, plus 30 plants in your control group that get pure water. Again, sample size refers to the number of independent tests. In this example, the number of plants receiving the same salt concentration, while each trial is a different condition. In the example, the concentration of salt. A project is also problematic if there is no quantifiable data. You need to be able to measure something to answer your problem statement. If you're looking at whether one spot on a cloth is redder or darker than another, there is nothing quantifiable to measure. Another unacceptable example is exploring how much air pollution is caused by printers. It would be very hard to quantify the exact amount of pollution released by a specific printer. You should also avoid projects with an obvious answer. If you are asking a question with a known answer, such as does magnetic force increase when two magnets are brought together, the answer is yes, and there is nothing to test. If you explored whether or not lighter fuel helps things burn, then the answer is yes. The point of lighter fuel is to help things burn. Besides, this project would not pass the safety screening, so just don't do it. Your project can't be a demonstration either. A demonstration shows something happening or how something works, which is known. The majority of science fair projects seen in movies are demonstrations. Volcanoes, Mentos and soda, and models of the solar system are all examples. Chances are, if you have seen it in a movie, it is probably not an acceptable project. Additionally, your project cannot discover something already observed. Examples would be looking at the salinity of salt water or the boiling point of oil. These metrics have already been established and they don't need to be redefined. Projects cannot be based on preference, such as comparing Coke versus Pepsi. They also cannot compare genders, ethnicities, etc. It is not acceptable to look at what is the favorite color of boys or girls, or who is smarter, boys versus girls. Science fair projects don't work if they compare two unrelated variables. For example, does music help plants grow? Or does hair color affect strength? If the variables are not related, then you will not get useful data. It will all be random variation. The variable that is changed and the data measured must have a logical connection to succeed. Finally, if you're doing an engineering project, it has to be something useful and functional. If your project is simply a clay model, for example, and does not solve a need or perform a function, then it would be unacceptable. Remember, a good STEM fair project has a question that can be answered by manipulating one variable and quantifiably measuring the result. the experiment can be reproduced as many times as necessary. Engineering projects solve real-world problems and can be demonstrated to function properly. Now that you know what to avoid, I'm sure you'll pick a great project.